She was humiliated for her looks, until she discovered the man who defended her was the Mafia boss, and what happened next would change everything she believed about love, power, and the meaning of being truly seen. The rain fell heavy over Manhattan that November evening, the kind of cold rain that seeps through coats and settles into bones. Clara Bennett walked quickly down Fifth Avenue, her worn shoes splashing through puddles that reflected the golden lights of luxury storefronts she could never afford to enter. At 32 years old, she had grown accustomed to being invisible in a city that worshipped beauty and wealth, two things that had always seemed just beyond her reach. She worked as a data analyst for a mid-sized financial firm, the kind of job that paid enough to survive in a cramped Brooklyn apartment, but never enough to truly live. Her colleagues rarely invited her to after-work drinks, and when they did, she could feel their eyes sliding past her as if she were furniture. Clara had learned to make herself small, to occupy as little space as possible, to expect nothing from a world that had given her even less. Her reflection caught in a store window, and she looked away quickly, as she always did. The scar that ran from her left temple to her cheekbone was barely visible in the dim light, but she knew it was there. A childhood accident, the doctors had said, one that had taken her mother and left Clara with a permanent reminder etched into her face. 25 years later, she still could not look at herself without remembering the sound of screeching tires, the smell of gasoline, the way her mother's hand had gone limp in hers. Tonight was supposed to be different. Her company was hosting its annual gala at the Plaza Hotel, and attendance was mandatory for all employees. Clara had spent her entire savings on a simple black dress, hoping that for once she might blend in rather than stand out for all the wrong reasons. She had even attempted to style her dark hair in a way that might draw attention away from the left side of her face, though she knew it was futile. The plaza loomed before her, its grand facade glittering like a palace from another era. Doormen in crisp uniforms held umbrellas for arriving guests, their practiced smiles never wavering as they ushered in women draped in designer gowns and men in tailored tuxedos. Clara hesitated at the entrance, her heart hammering against her ribs. She did not belong here. She had never belonged anywhere. But she had come this far. She would not turn back now. The ballroom was everything she had expected and more. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light over round tables dressed in white linen, each centerpiece an elaborate arrangement of white roses and trailing ivy. A string quartet played softly in the corner, while servers in black circulated with trays of champagne and delicate appetizers. The air smelled of expensive perfume and possibility, neither of which seemed meant for someone like her. Clara found her assigned table near the back of the room, far from the stage where the company executives would later give their speeches. She recognized a few faces from her department, colleagues who offered polite nods before returning to their conversations. No one pulled out a chair for her. No one asked about her evening. She sat alone, her hands folded in her lap, and tried to remember why she had thought this would be any different. The evening dragged on. Speeches were made, awards were given, and Clara clapped along with everyone else while feeling increasingly invisible. She had just decided to slip out early when a voice cut through the ambient noise, sharp and cruel and unmistakably directed at her. "Oh my God, Victoria, look who actually showed up." Clara's stomach dropped. She recognized that voice. Meredith Cole, the head of marketing and the unofficial queen of office politics, was standing just a few feet away with a group of women. Clara knew only by their expensive shoes and practiced laughs. Meredith was everything Clara was not: blonde, beautiful, and utterly confident in her place in the world. "I did not know they were letting in charity cases tonight," Meredith continued, loud enough for nearby tables to hear. "Someone should tell HR that the dress code said black tie, not black eye." Laughter rippled through the group. Clara felt her face burn, the scar on her cheek suddenly feeling like a brand. She wanted to disappear, to melt into the floor and never surface again. But her legs would not move. She sat frozen, exposed, while Meredith's words landed like physical blows. Seriously, though, how does someone let themselves look like that? There are surgeons for that kind of thing, or at least concealer. More laughter. I guess some people just do not care about making others uncomfortable. Clara's vision blurred. She would not cry. She would not give them the satisfaction, but the tears were already building, hot and shameful, and she knew she had only seconds before they fell. "That is enough." The voice came from behind Clara, deep and quiet, but carrying an authority that silenced the entire section of the ballroom. She turned, along with everyone else, to see a man she had never noticed before. He stood perhaps 6 feet tall, with dark hair touched with silver at the temples and eyes the color of storm clouds over the Atlantic. His tuxedo fit him like a second skin, clearly custom-made, and there was something in his bearing that suggested he was not accustomed to being in a room without commanding it. Meredith's smile faltered. "Excuse me? This is a private conversation." "There is nothing private about humiliating someone in public." The man stepped forward, and Clara noticed that the people around them had gone very still. Even the servers had paused mid-step. "I believe you owe this woman an apology. I do not know who you think you are, but you cannot just—" "My name is Alexander Russo." His voice did not rise, but somehow it seemed to fill the entire room. "And I am the primary investor in the company that signs your paychecks, which means I can do whatever I want, including having security escort you out of this building within the next 30 seconds if you do not apologize." The color drained from Meredith's face. Clara watched as the woman who had tormented her for years suddenly looked very small, her designer gown and perfect makeup no armor against the quiet devastation in this stranger's voice. I am sorry," Meredith stammered, her eyes darting between Alexander and Clara. "I did not mean... It was just a joke." Cruelty is never a joke. Alexander turned to Clara then, and something in his expression softened almost imperceptibly. "Are you all right?" Clara opened her mouth, but no words came out. She could only nod, overwhelmed by the sudden shift in the evening, by the presence of this man who had appeared like a storm and defended her. Without hesitation. No one had ever done that before. No one had ever thought she was worth defending. "Would you like to leave?" Alexander asked, offering his hand. "I know a place where the conversation is considerably more civilized." She should have said no. Every instinct she had developed over 32 years of self-preservation screamed at her to decline, to retreat to her Brooklyn apartment and never speak of this night again. But something in his eyes held her, something that looked almost like recognition, as if he understood what it meant to be judged by surfaces rather than substance. Clara took his hand. He led her through the ballroom, and she was acutely aware of every eye following their progress. The whispers had already begun, a susurrus of speculation that would no doubt fuel office gossip for weeks. But with Alexander's hand warm and steady around hers, she found she did not care. For the first time in her memory, she was not trying to disappear. She was being seen. They exited through a side door into a private corridor, where 2 men in dark suits fell into step behind them without a word. Clara's heart rate spiked. Who was this man, really? Investors did not typically travel with what looked suspiciously like bodyguards. "You are wondering who I am," Alexander said, as if reading her thoughts, "beyond the name and the investment portfolio." The thought had crossed my mind. He smiled, and it transformed his face from severe to almost boyish. "Most people do not have the courage to admit that. They just Google me in the bathroom. I left my phone at the table. Fortunate for me, then. It means I get to tell you myself." He guided her toward an elevator, the doors of which opened immediately at their approach. "I am a businessman. My family has interests in real estate, hospitality, and various other ventures. Some legitimate, some less so." Clara's breath caught. "Less so?" "I believe in honesty, Clara. May I call you Clara?" She nodded, unable to speak. "The world we live in is not kind to honest people, but I have found that lies create more problems than they solve. So yes, my family's business has roots in activities that exist outside the law, but I have spent the last decade working to change that, to build something that can stand in the light." The elevator rose smoothly, and Clara watched the numbers climb while processing his words. He was telling her he was connected to organized crime. He was telling her this, in an elevator, with bodyguards waiting outside after defending her honor in front of 200 people. She should be terrified. Instead, she felt an inexplicable calm, as if she had finally found solid ground after years of treading water. "Why did you help me?" she asked, as the doors opened onto a rooftop terrace overlooking the city. The rain had stopped, and Manhattan spread before them like a circuit board of light, beautiful and indifferent, and somehow less intimidating from this height. Alexander walked to the edge of the terrace, his hands in his pockets, and looked out at the skyline. "Because I know what it feels like to be judged for things beyond your control. My father built an empire on fear and violence. When I was young, other children would not play with me because of our family name. Their parents would pull them away as if cruelty were contagious." He turned to face her. "Your scar does not define you any more than my father's sins define me. But the world does not always see it that way." Clara moved to stand beside him, close enough to feel the warmth radiating from his body. "And the woman, Meredith, she will not face any real consequences, will she? She has already faced them. By tomorrow, everyone at that company will know that she insulted someone under my protection. Her career there is effectively over." He glanced at her. "Unless you would prefer I handle it differently." "No, no, that is more than enough." Clara shook her head. "Overwhelmed. I do not understand why you are doing this. You do not know me. We have never met." "We have not met formally, no." Alexander's voice softened. "But I have noticed you, Clara Bennett, in meetings where you sit in the back and never speak, even though I have read your reports and know you are the most intelligent person in the room, at company events where you arrive alone and leave early, in the lobby of your building where you hold the door for everyone but never expect anyone to hold it for you." He paused. "I have been watching you for months, trying to find the right moment to introduce myself. Tonight seemed appropriate." Clara's heart was racing now, but not from fear. "You have been watching me? That sounds considerably more sinister than I intended." A ghost of a smile crossed his face. "I prefer to think of it as waiting, for someone who might understand that power does not have to mean cruelty, that strength can protect rather than harm. I have spent my entire life surrounded by people who want something from me. Money, influence, protection. You are the first person I have encountered who seems to want nothing at all. Maybe I just do not know what to want. Or maybe you have forgotten that you deserve to want anything." Alexander reached out and very gently tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, his fingertips barely grazing the edge of her scar. "You are beautiful, Clara. Not in spite of this, but including it. Everything you have survived has made you who you are. And who you are is remarkable." No one had ever spoken to her like this. No one had ever looked at her the way Alexander was looking at her now, as if she were something precious rather than something to be pitied or ignored. Clara felt tears threatening again, but these were different. These came from a place she had thought was permanently frozen. "I should go," she whispered, though she made no move to leave. "You should do whatever you want. That is the whole point." Alexander stepped back, giving her space. "But if you are willing, I would like to see you again tomorrow night. I will send a car to your apartment at 7. You know where I live?" "I know many things, Clara, but I would rather learn them from you directly." He smiled again, and this time it reached his eyes. "Say yes." She said, "Yes. Check if you are already subscribed to this channel. If stories that make you feel seen, stories that remind you that everyone deserves to be defended, are the kind of stories that speak to your heart, then this is where you belong. Subscribe now so you never miss a moment of what happens next." The car arrived at exactly 7 the following evening, a sleek black vehicle that looked wildly out of place on Clara's modest Brooklyn street. Her neighbors watched from their windows as she descended the steps of her building in a dress she had bought that afternoon, a deep blue that the saleswoman had promised brought out her eyes. Clara had almost not bought it. The price tag was more than she usually spent on groceries in a month, but something had shifted in her overnight, some locked door inside her chest that had cracked open just enough to let in light. The driver, a middle-aged man with kind eyes and an impeccable suit, opened the door for her without a word. Inside, the car smelled like leather and something subtly expensive, and Clara found herself sinking into the seat like it was a warm bath. She had never been in a vehicle this nice. She had never been anywhere this nice except perhaps as a spectator. They drove through the city as night fell, crossing the bridge into Manhattan and weaving through streets that grew progressively more elegant. Clara watched the transition from her window, marveling at how different the world looked from inside this car. The homeless man on the corner did not meet her eyes. The couple arguing outside the bodega did not notice her passing. She was invisible again, but this time by choice, by privilege, and she was not sure how she felt about the difference. The car stopped in front of a building she did not recognize, though she knew they were somewhere in the Upper East Side. The architecture was old-world European, limestone and iron, with a canopy that extended to the curb like a red carpet. A doorman appeared instantly, opening her door with a practiced smile. "Miss Bennet, Mr. Russo is expecting you." She was led through a lobby that resembled a museum, all marble floors and oil paintings in gilded frames, to a private elevator that required a key to operate. The ride was smooth and silent, and when the doors opened, Clara stepped directly into what she could only describe as a palace. The penthouse spanned the entire floor, its walls of glass offering panoramic views of Central Park and the glittering towers beyond. The furniture was modern but warm, leather and wood and soft fabrics in muted tones. A fire crackled in an enormous hearth despite the building's obvious sophistication, and the air smelled of cedar and something cooking, something rich and savory that made her stomach tighten with hunger. Alexander stood by the window, silhouetted against the city lights. He had exchanged his tuxedo for a simple black sweater and dark trousers, and the effect was somehow more devastating than his formal wear had been. He looked powerful and comfortable, a man entirely at ease in his domain. "You came," he said, turning to face her. "You sent a car. It seemed rude to waste the trip." He laughed, a genuine sound that softened the severe angles of his face. "I was not sure you would. I thought perhaps the daylight would make you reconsider. Most people do, once they have time to think about what it means to be associated with someone like me." "I did consider it." Clara moved further into the room, drawn by the warmth of the fire and something else she could not name. "I researched you, read every article, every rumor, every piece of gossip I could find." "And what did you conclude?" "That either you are the most dangerous man in New York, or you are the most misunderstood." "Possibly both." Alexander's eyes glittered with something like approval. "And yet, here you are. Here I am." He gestured toward the kitchen, which opened onto the living space in a design that spoke of dinner parties and intimate gatherings rather than solitary meals. "I hope you are hungry. I have been cooking all afternoon." "You cook? Does that surprise you?" "A little. I suppose I expected a private chef and a team of servants." "I have those too, but I sent them home tonight. I wanted this to be personal." Alexander pulled out a chair at a small table set for two, candlelight flickering over crystal glasses and fine china. "Please?" Clara sat, her mind spinning with questions. This was not what she had expected. She had prepared herself for intimidation, for displays of wealth and power designed to impress or overwhelm. Instead, she found herself sitting across from a man who had apparently spent hours preparing a meal for her, whose home felt lived in rather than staged, whose eyes held a vulnerability that contradicted everything she had read about him. "You are not what I expected," she said as he served the first course, a delicate soup that smelled of truffle and something green. "Neither are you." Alexander sat across from her, his movements graceful and unhurried. "The reports my people compiled suggested someone quiet, someone who preferred invisibility. But the woman who took my hand last night, who walked out of that ballroom with her head high despite everything that had just happened, she was not invisible. She was incandescent." Clara's cheeks warmed. "Your people compiled reports on me." "It is a precaution. I do not let anyone into my life without understanding who they are. But the reports only tell me facts, Clara. They do not tell me why you stopped pursuing the promotion you were clearly qualified for. They do not tell me why you live alone in an apartment with no photographs on the walls. They do not tell me why you flinch when someone raises their voice, even in celebration. The soup suddenly tasted like ash. Clara set down her spoon, her appetite vanishing. Those are not things I talk about. You do not have to. Not tonight. Not ever, if you prefer. Alexander's voice was gentle, patient. But I want you to know that whatever you have survived, whatever has made you believe, you are not worthy of kindness or attention or love. I see past it. I see you. Tears pricked at her eyes again. She blinked them back, furious at her own weakness. You barely know me. I know enough. I know that you send half your paycheck to a children's hospital every month, even though it means you cannot afford new shoes. I know that you stay late at work not because you have to, but because you have nowhere else to be. I know that you volunteered at a literacy program for 3 years until it lost its funding, and then you cried in the bathroom of your office because you had failed children you had never met. Alexander leaned forward, his gaze intense. I know that you are the most genuinely good person I have encountered, in a life filled with people who pretend to be good while hiding rot beneath their smiles, and I know that goodness like yours should be protected, not punished. Clara did not know what to say. No one had ever seen her like this, not since her mother had died, not since the accident had taught her that love was something that could be taken away in an instant, without warning, without mercy. She had spent her entire adult life building walls, making herself small, expecting nothing so that she could never be disappointed. And here was this man, this allegedly dangerous, allegedly ruthless man, dismantling her defenses with nothing more than truth. Why me? She finally managed. You could have anyone. You probably have had anyone. Why would you choose someone like me? Because you are the only one who has never tried to choose me. Alexander reached across the table and took her hand, his grip warm and steady. Everyone I have ever known has wanted something from me. Power, money, protection, status. You do not want any of that. You do not want anything except to be left alone with your grief and your guilt and your quiet acts of kindness. And that makes you the most valuable person I have ever met. They ate in silence after that, but it was not an uncomfortable silence. It was the silence of two people who had said more than enough, who understood that some connections do not require constant words to sustain them. Alexander served course after course, each one more impressive than the last, and Clara found herself relaxing into the evening, into the warmth of the fire and the soft music playing from invisible speakers and the steady presence of the man across from her. After dinner, he led her to a sitting area by the windows, where the city sprawled below them like a living map. They sat side by side on a leather sofa, close enough that their shoulders almost touched, and watched the lights flicker and shift. "Tell me something true," Clara said. "Something that is not in any report." Alexander was quiet for a long moment. "My mother died when I was 12. She was not sick, not elderly, just caught in the wrong place when the wrong people came looking for my father. I found her, in the kitchen. She had been making breakfast." Clara's heart clenched. "I am so sorry. I have never told anyone that. Not the full truth of it. People know she died, of course, but no one knows that I was the one who found her, that I held her hand while the light left her eyes." His voice was steady, but she could hear the cracks beneath the surface. "That is why I understand, Clara, why I see you so clearly, because we have both loved someone who was taken from us, and we have both spent our lives trying to survive that loss." She did not plan to tell him. The words simply came as if his confession had unlocked something inside her. "My mother and I were in a car accident when I was 7. A truck ran a red light. She died on impact. I survived, obviously, but..." She touched her scar, that permanent reminder. "I do not remember much about her anymore. Just the way she smelled, like lavender and something sweet, and the way her hand felt in mine before everything went dark. Alexander turned to face her, his expression raw with empathy. We are both orphans of violence, both survivors who never asked to survive. Yes. The word came out as barely a whisper. He reached out then, slowly, giving her every opportunity to pull away. When she did not, he cupped her face in his palm, his thumb tracing the edge of her scar with infinite gentleness. You are not broken, Clara. You are not damaged. You are a testament to the human capacity to endure, and you deserve someone who will remind you of that every single day. Clara closed her eyes, leaning into his touch. I do not know how to do this, any of this. I have been alone for so long. Then let me teach you. Let me show you what it means to be cared for. Not because you need saving, but because you deserve to be loved. She opened her eyes and found his face very close to hers, his breath warm against her skin. And what do you get out of this arrangement? The privilege of knowing you, the honor of being trusted by someone who has every reason not to trust. His lips curved into a small smile, and perhaps eventually, if I am very fortunate, the chance to make you happy. When he kissed her, it was gentle, questioning, nothing like the forceful claim she might have expected from a man of his reputation. It was a question, not a demand, and Clara answered it by leaning closer, by allowing herself, for the first time in 25 years, to want something she could not control. The weeks that followed were unlike anything Clara had ever experienced. Alexander did not push, did not demand, did not assume. He courted her with a patience that seemed almost old-fashioned, taking her to restaurants she had only read about, to galleries where they were the only visitors, to a concert at Carnegie Hall, where their private box offered views of both the stage and each other. But more than the extravagance, it was the small moments that undid her. The way he texted her every morning to ask about her day. The way he remembered her coffee order after hearing it once. The way he listened, truly listened, when she spoke about her work, her dreams, her fears. No one had ever paid such close attention to her, had ever made her feel that her words mattered. She learned about his life in fragments, the legitimate businesses he had built from the ashes of his father's empire, hotels, restaurants, a foundation that funded education programs in underserved communities, the ongoing struggle to distance from the violence that had defined his family for generations, the enemies who would never forgive him for trying to go straight, who saw his transformation as betrayal rather than redemption. There are people who want me to fail, he told her one evening as they walked through Central Park in the early winter darkness. People who profit from the old ways, who need me to be the monster my father was. If I succeed in legitimizing everything, they lose their power, their money, their reason for existing. Clara squeezed his hand. That sounds dangerous. It is. Which is why I need you to understand what you are getting into, Clara. I will never force you to stay. But if you stay, there may be risks. People who want to hurt me may try to hurt you. I have security measures in place, people who will protect you, but I cannot guarantee your safety. Not completely. She thought about this for a long moment, watching their breath form clouds in the cold air. My mother died because a stranger ran a red light. My entire life was destroyed by random chance. At least with you, I know what the risks are. I can make an informed choice. And what do you choose? Clara stopped walking and turned to face him. I choose you. I choose whatever comes with you. Because for the first time in my life, I feel like I am actually living instead of just surviving. Alexander pulled her close, his arms wrapping around her like armor. I will do everything in my power to keep you safe, to make you happy, to be worthy of the trust you are placing in me. I know you will. They stood like that for a long time, two broken people holding each other together against the cold and the dark and the uncertainty of the future. And Clara realized, with something like wonder, that she was no longer afraid, not of him, not of his world, not of the love that was growing between them like a flame in the night. The first sign of trouble came 3 weeks later. Clara was leaving work when she noticed a black SUV parked across the street from her office building. It was not Alexander's car. She knew his fleet by now, the license plates and the drivers and the subtle security features built into each vehicle. This was something else. Someone else. She walked faster, her heart hammering, and pulled out her phone to text Alexander. But before she could type a word, the SUV pulled away from the curb and disappeared into traffic. By the time Alexander's security team arrived to escort her home, there was no sign of the vehicle, no evidence that anything had happened at all. It could be nothing, Alexander said that night, but the tension in his jaw told a different story. A coincidence. You do not believe in coincidences. No, I do not. He was pacing his penthouse, his usual calm replaced by a restless energy that Clara found unsettling. I am going to increase your security detail, and I think it would be best if you stayed here for a while, until we understand what we are dealing with. Clara wanted to argue, to assert her independence, but she could see the fear in his eyes, fear not for himself, but for her. Okay, if that is what you think is best. He stopped pacing and came to her, taking her hands in his. I am sorry. I know this is not what you signed up for. I know I promised to make your life easier, not harder. You did not promise anything except honesty, and you are being honest with me now. She reached up to touch his face. We will figure this out. Together. 2 days later, they discovered who was behind the surveillance. Marco Vitelli, a former associate of Alexander's father, had been slowly building power in the territories Alexander had abandoned. He saw Alexander's legitimization efforts as a threat to his operations, and he had decided to send a message. That message arrived in the form of photographs. Clara found them in her office mailbox, unmarked and untraceable. Photographs of her walking to work, photographs of her apartment, building, photographs of her mother's grave in a cemetery she visited once a year on the anniversary of the accident. Each image was time-stamped, proving that someone had been following her for weeks, documenting her movements, learning her patterns. She did not cry, she did not panic. She gathered the photographs, left her office without a word, and went directly to Alexander's building. By the time she arrived, she was shaking with fury rather than fear. He thinks he can intimidate me, she said, throwing the photographs onto Alexander's desk. He thinks I will run, that I will leave you, that fear will be enough to break us apart. Alexander looked at the photographs, his expression hardening into something cold and dangerous. I will handle this. No, we will handle this. Together. Clara met his gaze, refusing to look away. You said you wanted a partner, someone who would stand beside you rather than behind you. This is me standing. This is me choosing to fight. Something shifted in Alexander's eyes. Pride, perhaps, or admiration, or something deeper. You are remarkable, Clara Bennett. Do you know that? I am starting to believe it. He pulled her into his arms then, holding her tightly against his chest. I will not let anything happen to you. I swear it on my mother's memory. I know, but I do not want you to protect me by pushing me away. Promise me that whatever happens, we face it together. I promise. The battle against Marco Vitelli would not be easy. Clara understood that now. Understood that loving Alexander meant entering a world where threats were not abstract but concrete, where enemies did not fight fair, where the cost of failure could be measured in lives rather than dollars. But she also understood something else. For the first time since her mother's death, she had something worth fighting for, someone worth risking everything for, and she would not let fear take that away from her. Before we continue, I want to ask you something. If this story is touching your heart, if you are feeling everything Clara is feeling right now, leave a comment below with the words, I choose love over fear. Let me know that you are here, that you are part of this journey, because your presence means more than you could ever know. The following weeks were a careful dance between normalcy and vigilance. Clara moved into Alexander's penthouse permanently, her few belongings quickly absorbed into his expansive closets and the security of his fortified world. She continued working at her company, though now a discreet security detail accompanied her everywhere. The black SUVs no longer appeared, but Clara knew that did not mean the threat had passed. It only meant that Marco Vitelli was waiting for the right moment to strike. Alexander threw himself into the task of dismantling Vitelli's operation through legal means. His team of lawyers filed injunction after injunction, blocking the criminal enterprises that funded Vitelli's power. His legitimate businesses expanded into territories Vitelli had claimed, offering honest wages and clean operations to workers who had known nothing but exploitation. It was a slow war, a quiet war, but Alexander fought it with a relentless determination that Clara found both inspiring and terrifying. She had never seen anyone work as hard as he did. Meetings that lasted well past midnight, phone calls in languages she did not understand, his voice shifting from Italian to Russian to something guttural and sharp that might have been Albanian, encrypted messages on devices that seemed to multiply every week. Alexander carried the weight of his transformation on shoulders that never seemed to tire, but Clara could see the toll it was taking. The shadows under his eyes deepened, his appetite diminished. He smiled less often, and when he did, the smiles did not reach his eyes. One evening, she found him standing by the windows, staring out at the city he was trying to save from men like his father, like Vitelli, like the ghosts of violence that haunted every corner of this world. "Tell me what you are thinking," she said, moving to stand beside him. "I am thinking about legacy." His voice was distant, contemplative. "My father built an empire on fear and pain. People suffered because of him. People died because of him. And for years, I told myself that I could escape that I could be different, that the sins of the father did not have to become the sins of the son. And now? Now I am not sure that escape is possible. Maybe the best I can hope for is transformation, taking the power he built and using it for something better, redirecting the violence into protection instead of harm." He turned to look at her, and his eyes were haunted. "But what if it is not enough? What if I can never undo the damage that was done?" Clara took his hand, intertwining her fingers with his. "No one can undo the past, Alexander. Not you, not me, not anyone. All we can do is build something better in the present and hope it matters." "You make it sound simple." "It is not simple, but it is true." She leaned her head against his shoulder. "The man I love is not his father. He is someone who spends every hour of every day trying to make the world safer, gentler, more just. That is the legacy you are building. Not the one you inherited, but the one you are choosing." He was quiet for a long moment. Then, very softly, "I love you too." It was the first time either of them had said it out loud. Clara felt the words settle into her chest like something that had always been there, waiting to be named. "Good," she said, "because I was starting to wonder." Alexander laughed, a genuine sound that chased away some of the shadows in his eyes. "Were you?" A girl likes to hear these things occasionally, even girls who move into penthouses and acquire security details. He turned to face her fully, his hands coming up to cup her face. "I love you, Clara Bennett. I love your courage and your kindness, and the way you see light in places where everyone else sees only darkness. I love that you chose me, despite every reason not to. I love that you are standing here right now, refusing to let me drown in my own doubt." "I love you too," she said, "and I am not going anywhere." When they kissed, it felt like a promise, a vow, something sacred and binding that went deeper than words, deeper than logic, deeper than the danger that still lurked at the edges of their lives. Clara held on to him and let herself believe, truly believe, that love could be stronger than fear, that two broken people could create something whole together. The next morning, everything changed. Clara was in the kitchen, making coffee the way Alexander had taught her, when his head of security burst through the door. The man's face was pale, his usual composure shattered. "We have a problem," he said. "Vitelli's people have taken the Mendez family." Clara did not know who the Mendez family was, but she could see from Alexander's expression that they mattered. He stood from the breakfast table, his coffee forgotten, his entire body going rigid with tension. "When?" "This morning. The father was on his way to work. They grabbed him and the two children from the car. The mother is at the compound now asking for you." "The children." Alexander's voice was barely above a whisper. How old? 8 and 5, both girls. Clara watched as something in Alexander's face shifted, hardened, transformed into something cold and deadly. This was the man his enemies feared, she realized, the man who had inherited an empire built on violence and still carried that capacity within him, dormant but never fully extinguished. Get my team together, he said, all of them, and find me everything you have on where Vitelli might be holding them. The security chief nodded and disappeared. Alexander turned to Clara, and for a moment she saw both versions of him, the man who loved her and the man who could destroy anyone who threatened what was his. I have to go, he said, I know. I do not know how long this will take or how it will end, but I need you to stay here where you are safe. Can you do that for me? Clara wanted to argue. Every instinct screamed at her to be useful, to help, to do something other than wait. But she could see the desperation in his eyes, the need to know that at least one person he loved was protected while he walked into danger. I will stay, she said, but you have to promise me that you will come back. I promise. He kissed her forehead, her cheeks, her lips. I will always come back to you. And then he was gone, leaving Clara alone in the penthouse with nothing but her fear and her faith and the desperate hope that the man she loved would survive whatever was coming. The hours that followed were the longest of Clara's life. She paced the apartment, unable to eat, unable to rest, unable to do anything but wait for news that might never come. The security team had locked down the building, and she could see guards stationed at every entrance, their faces grim and watchful. She thought about the Mendez children, 2 little girls whose only crime was being connected to a man who had chosen to work for Alexander instead of Vitelli. She thought about their mother, alone and terrified, not knowing if she would ever see her daughters again. She thought about Alexander, walking into a confrontation with men who would not hesitate to end his life if it served their purposes. And she thought about herself, about the woman she had been before Alexander had walked into her life and changed everything. That woman would have crumbled under this pressure. That woman would have retreated into her apartment and her isolation, and her carefully maintained invisibility. But Clara was not that woman anymore. She was someone who had learned to hope, to love, to fight for something beyond mere survival. When the phone finally rang, she answered it with hands that did not shake. It is done. Alexander's voice was tired, strained, but alive. The children are safe. The father is injured but will recover. Vitelli has been neutralized. Clara let out a breath she did not realize she had been holding. You are okay? I am coming home. We can talk when I get there. I will be waiting. She ended the call and sank onto the sofa, tears streaming down her face. But these were tears of relief, of gratitude, of a love so fierce it felt like it might consume her entirely. Alexander was alive, the children were safe, and whatever else had happened, whatever price had been paid for their freedom, they had survived. When Alexander walked through the door an hour later, Clara was in his arms before he could say a word. She held him tightly, feeling his heart beat against her chest, his breath warm against her hair, his body solid and real and present. Tell me, she said. And he did. He told her about the warehouse, where Vitelli had been holding the family, the negotiations that had failed, the confrontation that had followed. He told her about the fight, about the choices he had made, about the line he had crossed to ensure that the children would go home to their mother. He did not spare her the details, did not try to make himself seem better than he was. When he finished, Clara pulled back to look at his face. And Vitelli. He will not be a threat to anyone again. She nodded slowly, processing the implications. Are you okay with what you had to do? Alexander was quiet for a long moment. I do not know. I thought I had left that part of myself behind. I thought I had become someone who could solve problems without violence. But when I saw those little girls, when I thought about what might happen to them if I failed, he shook his head. I would do it again, 1,000 times, for them, For you. For anyone I love. Clara reached up to touch his face. Then that is who you are. Not a saint, not a monster, but a man who will do whatever it takes to protect the people who matter. I can live with that. You deserve better. I deserve you. Exactly as you are. She kissed him gently. Now come to bed. You need rest, and I need to hold you until I believe you are really here. He let her lead him to the bedroom, let her undress him carefully, let her pull him down beside her and wrap her arms around him like she could shield him from the world. And in the darkness, as his breathing slowed and his body relaxed into sleep, Clara made a silent vow. Whatever came next, whatever challenges they faced, whatever enemies rose against them, she would be there. Not as a damsel to be saved, but as a partner, a protector, a warrior in her own right. Alexander had shown her that love could be a fortress. Now she would help him defend it. Spring arrived in New York with a sudden burst of warmth, melting the last stubborn patches of snow and coaxing green shoots from the grey earth. Clara stood on the terrace of the penthouse, watching the park below transform from winter's barren landscape into something lush and promising. 6 months had passed since the night Alexander had saved the Mendez children. 6 months of slowly building a life together, of learning each other's rhythms and fears and dreams. The threat of Vitelli's organization had been neutralized, but Alexander had not relaxed his vigilance. If anything, he had redoubled his efforts to transform his family's business into something entirely legitimate. The last of the questionable operations had been shut down or transferred to legal alternatives. The foundation they had started together, focused on supporting families affected by organized crime, had helped hundreds of people start new lives, and the enemies who had once circled like sharks had gradually retreated, recognizing that Alexander Russo was no longer a man who could be challenged. But Clara knew that true transformation was never complete. It was a daily choice, a constant recommitment to being better than the circumstances of your birth. She saw it in Alexander's face every morning when he woke and chose to build rather than destroy. She saw it in the way he treated his employees, his partners, the strangers who crossed his path without knowing who he was. He was becoming the man he wanted to be, one decision at a time. And she was becoming someone new too. The woman who had once hidden from the world behind her. Scar and her grief had gradually emerged into the light. Clara had returned to her volunteer work, teaching financial literacy to underprivileged communities and helping families learn to manage their resources. She had accepted a promotion at her company, finally stepping into a leadership role that her skills had always deserved. She had even started speaking at conferences, sharing her expertise with audiences who had no idea that she had once been afraid to raise her hand in meetings. But, more than any professional accomplishment, what had truly transformed her was the knowledge that she was loved. Not despite her scars, not in spite of her past, but because of who those experiences had made her. Alexander saw her completely, all of her, and found her worthy of devotion. That certainty had rewritten everything she believed about herself. On a warm afternoon in late April, Alexander took her hand and led her to a part of the city she had never seen. They walked through a neighborhood in Brooklyn that felt like it had been frozen in time. Brownstones with stoops where children played, and grandmothers watched from windows draped with lace. "Where are we going?" Clara asked. "You will see." They stopped in front of a building that looked abandoned, its windows boarded up and its facade covered in graffiti. But when Alexander produced a key and opened the front door, Clara gasped. Inside, the building had been completely renovated. Gleaming hardwood floors stretched beneath exposed brick walls. Modern light fixtures hung from high ceilings. A central staircase curved gracefully toward upper floors that promised even more beauty. "What is this place?" "It is yours, if you want it." Alexander watched her face carefully, gauging her reaction. The Clara Bennett Center for Family Resilience, a place where families affected by violence can find support, counseling, job training, and hope. I have been working on it for months, and it is finally ready. Clara walked through the space in a daze, touching the walls, the door frames, the window ledges. Everything was perfect, Everything was exactly what she would have chosen if she had been brave enough to dream this big. "You did this for me?" "I did this because of you. Because you showed me that survival can become strength, that trauma can become compassion, that the worst experiences of our lives can become fuel for helping others." Alexander came to stand beside her. "You taught me that redemption is not about erasing the past. It is about building something beautiful from its ruins." Clara turned to face him, tears streaming down her face. "I do not know what to say." "Say you will run it. Say you will pour your heart into this place the way you have poured your heart into me. Say you will help me prove that love can rebuild what violence destroyed." "Yes." The word came out as a whisper, then stronger. "Yes. To all of it." Alexander's smile was like the sun breaking through clouds, pulled her into his arms, lifting her off the ground and spinning her around until she was dizzy with joy. "I love you, Clara Bennett. I love you too. More than I ever thought I could love anyone." When he set her down, he kept hold of her hands, his expression turning serious. "There is one more thing, something I have been wanting to ask you for a very long time." Clara's heart began to race. "What is it?" Alexander reached into his pocket and withdrew a small velvet box. When he opened it, a diamond ring caught the light, simple and elegant and absolutely perfect. "I know we have not had a traditional path to this moment. I know that our story has been complicated, sometimes dangerous, often difficult. But every challenge we have faced has only made me more certain that you are the person I want beside me for the rest of my life." He took a breath. "Clara Bennett, will you marry me?" Time seemed to stop. The building around them faded into nothing. The sounds of the city fell. Silent, and all that existed was this man, this moment, this impossible question that she had never dared to imagine anyone would ask her. "Yes." The word emerged from somewhere deep inside her, from a place that had been waiting her entire life for this moment. "Yes, I will marry you." Alexander slid the ring onto her finger, his hands trembling slightly, and then he was kissing her, and she was crying, and somewhere in the distance a car horn sounded and a child laughed, and the world continued spinning around two people who had somehow found each other in the chaos. When they finally pulled apart, Clara looked at the ring on her finger, then at the building around her, then at the man who had given her both. "Thank you," she said, "for seeing me, for choosing me, for never letting me believe that I was anything less than worthy of love. Thank you for teaching me that I was capable of giving it." Alexander brushed a tear from her cheek. "We have a lot of work ahead of us. The center, the foundation, the life we are building together, it will not be easy. Nothing worth having ever is." Clara smiled, and for the first time she could remember, the expression felt completely natural on her face. "But we will do it together, every step, every challenge, every triumph." "Together," Alexander agreed. "Always." They left the building hand in hand, stepping out into a spring afternoon that seemed brighter than any Clara had ever seen. The neighborhood that had seemed frozen in time now felt alive with possibility. A place where old things could become new, where broken things could be healed, where love could grow in the most unexpected soil. Clara looked at her ring again and thought about the journey that had brought her here, the accident that had taken her mother and marked her face, the years of isolation and invisibility, the night at the gala when a cruel woman had tried to humiliate her, and a powerful man had chosen to defend her instead. She was humiliated for her looks, until she discovered the man who defended her was the Mafia boss. But that was not the end of her story. It was only the beginning. The wedding took place on a September evening, when the heat of summer had softened into something golden and gentle. They married in a garden on the grounds of a historic estate that Alexander had acquired specifically for this purpose, surrounded by roses that had been cultivated for centuries and oak trees that had witnessed generations of vows. Clara wore a dress of simple white silk that caught the fading sunlight and turned it into radiance. Her scar was visible, as it always was, as it always would be. But she no longer tried to hide it. It was part of her story, part of the journey that had brought her to this moment, and she wore it with the same pride that she wore the ring on her finger. The guest list was small by design. The Mendez family was there, the two little girls now serving as flower girls, their mother, weeping with joy in the front row. Former colleagues from Clara's company attended, their earlier cruelty forgotten in the face of her transformation. Members of Alexander's organization, the ones who had remained loyal through his years of transition, stood beside them as witnesses to the union of two people who had chosen each other against all odds. But it was not the guests or the setting or even the dress that made the day perfect. It was the look in Alexander's eyes as Clara walked toward him down an aisle carpeted with rose petals, a look of such profound love and gratitude that it took her breath away. "You are beautiful," he whispered as she reached him. "So are you." The officiant spoke words about love and commitment, about partnership and perseverance, about the choice to build a life together even when the world makes it difficult. Clara listened with half her attention, the rest of it focused on the man beside her, this impossible man who had appeared in her life like an answer to a question she had been afraid to ask. When it was time for the vows, Alexander spoke first. "Clara, when I found you, I thought I was saving you, but you saved me. You showed me that the darkness in my past did not have to define my future. You taught me that strength and gentleness could coexist, that power could be used for protection rather than harm. You gave me something I had never dared to hope for, a family, a home, a reason to be better than I ever thought I could be." His voice cracked slightly, and he paused to compose himself. "I promise to spend every day of our lives proving myself worthy of your love. I promise to protect you, cherish you, and remind you of your value when you forget. I promise to build something beautiful with you, something that will outlast us both and make the world a little bit better for having existed. I love you, Clara Bennett. I love you today, I will love you tomorrow, and I will love you for every day after that, until my last breath." Clara wiped tears from her cheeks, then took both of his hands in hers. "Alexander, before I met you, I had given up on love. I had convinced myself that I was meant to be alone, that the scars I carried, both visible and invisible, made me unworthy of happiness. Then you walked into my life and showed me how wrong I was. You defended me when no one else would. You saw beauty where I saw only damage. You loved me completely, without reservation, without conditions." She squeezed his hands tightly. "I promise to stand beside you through whatever comes. I promise to be your partner in every challenge, your comfort in every sorrow, and your celebration in every joy. I promise to help you become the man you want to be, while never forgetting that the man you already are is extraordinary. I love you, Alexander Russo. I love you for seeing me when I was invisible, for choosing me when I was broken, and for teaching me that love is not something we earn, but something we create together." They exchanged rings, simple bands of gold that would serve as daily reminders of the vows they had made. And when the officiant pronounced them married, when Alexander pulled her into his arms and kissed her while their guests cheered, Clara felt something settle into place inside her, something that had been searching for a home her entire life. She was no longer invisible. She was no longer hiding. She was exactly where she was meant to be. The reception stretched long into the night, full of laughter and dancing and the kind of joy that Clara had thought was reserved for other people, luckier people, people without scars. She watched Alexander move through the crowd, gracious and charming, and marveled at how far they had both come. Later, when the guests had gone, and the music had faded, and the garden lay silent under a canopy of stars, they walked together through the roses, hand in hand, husband and wife. "What are you thinking?" Clara asked. "I am thinking about the future. Our future. The center is opening next month. The foundation is expanding into 3 new cities. And in about 7 months..." He paused, a smile spreading across his face. "Well, I suppose we will need to add a nursery to the penthouse." Clara stopped walking. "How did you know? You have been glowing for weeks, and you have not touched coffee in a month." His smile widened. "I was waiting for you to tell me." I was waiting for the right moment. This seems like a fairly good one. Clara laughed, joy bubbling up inside her like champagne. I suppose it does. She placed her hand over her stomach, over the tiny life growing inside her, the culmination of everything they had built together. Are you happy? Happy is not a big enough word. Alexander placed his hand over hers. I am grateful, overwhelmed, terrified, amazed. Every feeling I have ever had, all at once, all because of you. Our child is going to have the strangest story to tell their friends. Our child is going to have two parents who love them unconditionally and will do anything to give them a safe, happy life. That is the only story that matters. Clara leaned into him, resting her head against his shoulder as they looked up at the stars together. She thought about the journey that had brought her here, from the accident that had taken her mother to the years of invisibility, to the night a powerful man had defended her honor and changed her life forever. She was humiliated for her looks, until she discovered the man who defended her was the Mafia boss. But that was not the whole story. That was just the beginning. What followed was transformation, growth, love, and the discovery that the things we think make us unworthy of happiness are often the very things that prepare us to receive it. The world was not perfect. There would still be challenges, still be enemies, still be moments of fear and doubt. But Clara no longer faced them alone. She had Alexander beside her. And soon, she would have their child, and together they would build something that mattered. Love had not saved her. She had saved herself, one choice at a time. But love had shown her that she was worth saving. And that made all the difference. If you have watched this far, it is because this story has touched something inside you. It is because you know what it feels like to be overlooked, to be judged, to wonder if anyone will ever see the real you beneath the surface. I want you to know that I see you, and I want to know who you are. Leave a comment below saying, I watched this far, so I can meet the incredible people who have joined me on this journey. Your words mean more than you could ever imagine. And if this story has moved you, if it has given you hope or made you feel less alone, please take a moment to hit that like button and share this video with someone who needs to hear it. There is someone in your life right now who is struggling to believe they are worthy of love. Send them this story. Show them that transformation is possible. Finally, if you are not already part of this family, subscribe to this channel and turn on notifications so you never miss another story. Every week, I bring you tales of courage, redemption, and the extraordinary power of love to change everything. I would be honored to have you along for the ride. Thank you for being here. Thank you for watching. And remember, the most beautiful stories are the ones that remind us we are never as alone as we think.